Hi everyone, I'm Nisreen Cain. I go by she, her, and I'm very excited to be here with you and talk about my journey, how cross-functional collaboration and influence works, and we'll dive right into it. To begin with, I just want to give you like a high-level overview of my journey since I was like back in the day, I was like, as a little kid, I was a tinkerer. I loved engineering. I loved programming. So since I was maybe uh, 12, 13, when I got my first IBM computer, till today, I don't think I can live without computers. And I love being on the edge of innovation. And so my journey took me all over the place. I started with my internships at places like Google and Sun Microsystems, where I worked on like really low-level systems, like what runs your network and the Ethernet device drivers. And during my internship at Google, over 20 years ago now, I would have worked on the TCP/IP stack. So if you don't know what that is, that's a protocol that powers the internet, where all our messages go back and forth. And my job then was to like shave as many milliseconds as possible and benchmark it so that Google search runs faster. And from that time on, I thought I was going to go and stay into the academic environment. So I was at Mississippi State University, deep in the south of the United States, working on research and loving my students and working more focused on government applications and building government applications from mainframe into web applications. And that was my first experiences trying to understand how our users think, because my biggest challenge there was getting the users, the people behind those agencies, the people who are doing the work on a daily basis, to switch from their mainframe that they've been comfortable with for many, many years into this fancy web application. And that was a big challenge. And so I had to put on a different hat than an engineer trying to solve a solution, and started integrating into like, what would make my users buy my product, right? And so from that journey, through influence and other people, it's like, oh, we want you to come work with us on startups. That's when my startup journey started, I think, as early as 2010. With my husband, who's a gamer and he loves gaming platforms, and he creates gaming platforms and tools for tabletop gaming. So if you're in those industries, you might have used some of his software without knowing. And so Babel Street was my anchor for growing as a leader, and thinking about cross-functional teams and how we bring engineering and design and product together, and how we build on strategy, and what means for me as a leader to grow my team and give them the flexibility and space to create, and trust them to create and solve the problems we give them. So that was a lot of learning experiences for me, because from that time, I switched from being an engineering individual contributor, what we call an IC, into becoming an engineering leader and a thought leader in the spaces that I was. Babel Street was an amazing place. I'm still in touch with all of my people at Babel Street. But I got into a place, especially after, I don't know how many of you experienced COVID and all of the emotional surge and, navigating our inner spaces. And so after that, I was just like, I really need to get out of this cyber intelligence space, because it was like a hard place to see the darker side of humanity. And I wanted to do something a little bit more giving back. So I joined Propel, which is a United States-based fintech company that's trying to focus on low-income Americans and support them with better tools for their financial literacy and managing their, government-funded support. And I spent a year with them, which I promised to kind of grow their team and put their processes in place. And then I took a little break, and then I joined Google because, like, you remember, first early in the days of Google, when it was just one headquarters out of Mountain View, that's my internship. And I love the technology that Google creates. So I came back, but I brought back all of the pieces of myself into one place in ads, where it was focusing on user privacy, regulation, and engineering. And so I wanted to bring all of those aspects that I have been growing for many years and invest them in that space. And then, as the technology changes and as my curiosity around more AI and how we navigate the world with all of the changes that we have in the industry, I decided to kind of take a step back. And so when I got the opportunity to step away from Google, I moved over to education. So back to education. I started in education. I've always wanted to be a professor. And I'm going back and I'm teaching computer science and engineering at Southern Connecticut State University, as well as trying to educate as many people on AI and how we actually use it in a way that augments and amplifies our work instead of taking over what we're doing. So this is a little bit about me. I do have more slides, but I want to invite all of you to a conversation. That now that you know a little bit about me and about my journey, I would love for all of you to kind of like jump in, raise your hand, use the emojis and ask questions and be curious. I am here to answer as many of your questions as possible. And if there are no questions, we'll keep going through the slides because they'll inspire more questions. And that's how I've designed them. So I will pause here and invite you to ask questions. And that's why we have the slides. I am very comfortable with silence, by the way. So I'm putting a definition that says when people from different teams with different experiences work together towards a shared goal. That is sort of my definition of what a cross-functional collaboration looks like. I would love to hear from you. Does that resonate? What different definitions of it or understanding do you have? You can come off mute and chat about it.
I feel like maybe with different points of view too. Maybe, yeah.
Yeah. Different expertise and different points of view, different experiences, right? Because expertise and experiences are also different, right? And our experiences is our whole self. Our experiences is everything we've done to that point, the joys, the sadness, the trauma, the achievements, all of it kind of fuels our perspective on what we do. Any other definitions or words to come to your mind? Like, what is one word that comes to your mind? You can throw it in the chat. You don't have to come off mute. But like, what's a word that comes to mind when we say cross-functional collaboration? I'll tell you, some people's like scary. Some people would say things like out of my depth, or like, I love seeing other people's point of view. What is the word that comes to mind when we talk about cross-functional collaboration for you?
Maybe finding like a join point, like where our thoughts meet too.
Yeah, united. Kelly says united. I love that. I love that. So the question becomes, how do we get to united, right? Other words.
I think it helps you really challenge your assumptions about what you think the right solution is, because sometimes we think of it one way, but it might not actually be the tool that the end user needs.
Yes, 100%. Because again, the world is full of various experiences. If everything was one solution or one approach, we wouldn't have like hundreds of different platforms for email, or different platforms or apps for calendars or note taking, and we wouldn't have those. Every product comes from a different philosophy and different set of values, and based on those sets of values is how we define and build that. So it's really important to understand our values, the values of the product and the founders or the team that we're building from, so that we can take that and build the right product based on those values. Because if our value is to conquer the world versus to heal the world, the way we build our application is going to be very different. If our value is to, the bottom line and how much money we want to have, then that's going to drive the work that we do, and that's going to drive how we make decisions. So our values are very important in this space. All right. Other words and questions?
Sorry, I feel like every time that we talk about like cross-functional or a team, make me think about like, when you're in a school, I say we're going to do a teamwork, and everybody's like, no. We hated teamwork at a school, and I feel like that always the feeling translate going into work is like, oh, we have to work in a team. That's going to be a lot of work. There's going to be someone that is going to be doing more than me. It's going to take forever. I don't know. Yes.
That is a very good point. There's an amazing point. My current, what I currently do at the university is actually teach students capstone projects and like pre-capstone projects, and they're all team-based projects. And all of those concerns come to mind all the time, because when you and when you step also into a work environment, you don't know the type of team that you're going to be on, and the values that they bring and what's in their background, the circumstances that they're in. Sometimes people give a lot, sometimes people don't give as much. And so those tensions and being able to choose that and to choose the team you want to build with is really important. So for example, there's a difference between early stage startups, right? And as the startup starts to grow up and more people are joining and it becomes a corporation, there's a huge difference in the dynamics of the groups that we work on. So if you're in a small group and you're all dedicated to and believe in the mission of what you're working on, nothing will stop you from putting all the effort, and you'll see everyone, coming together. The challenge there becomes, how do we slow down a little bit and take each other's point of view and respect each other's differences? Whereas when you get into like a much bigger organization, it's different. The vibe is different. Where people are coming from, their agenda or goals of what they want to achieve is different. And this is why, as product and as we focus on our why and goal for the product, it's really important to always be reminded, like at every meeting, what is the goal? What is the value that we want to bring to the users? And how we want to approach that? That is the most important piece. Then you can make a lot of decisions based on that. If everyone buys to the why, then you have a really motivated team that wants to accomplish different things. Cross-functional collaboration is so hard. It's really hard, and there are a lot of stats to back that up. So if you're struggling with it, if you're like, oh, I don't want to do another team project, it's because cross-functional teams are 75% dysfunctional, right? And 78% of leaders also report that there's a collaboration drag, which means that collaboration and working in teams to get agreement takes a lot more time to get there, and that slows down decision. And from a leadership perspective, we want decisions to be made fast. But if the team is taking 2 or 3 weeks to make a key or a pivotal decision, that is going to be that collaboration drag that we're talking about as leaders, that we want to can we reduce that? And so, and also the perception between what we think the actual value of aligning the team versus what we get out of it is a 3x between perceived versus actual value of team alignment. So When we just jump in and think we're aligned because we have a project we're all working on without really understanding what our alignment and framework looks like, then our perceived versus actual team alignment is going to be vastly different than what we expect. So does that resonate with you? What are the pieces or stories that you might have gone through, or questions that you might have around how hard team collaboration is?
I was mentioning a little bit of this before the meeting, and I was just sharing how hard it is for like the squads to go into this space. As we think about, let's say, work, even at school, you get to see the people that you're working with constantly and in more periods of time. Here, that one of the constraints definitely is time, and how do we approach to each other, and how do we make sure that the perception versus the alignment is in there, even if we don't have time. So I feel like this is like a refreshing view of like, this is what happens when you have 40 hours working with a team. This is already there. So it's a big eye-opening, definitely.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, all of those points resonate. I'd love to hear from our squad. You are all here because you are trying to achieve something, right? And you're all connected around similar goals in your life that brought you to this place where you're trying to learn how to do product, and how to learn to be in a cross-functional team and to influence. So let's dive in. I want to introduce you to a framework. I love working with frameworks because they give us a clarity and they give us a system that we can actually test. So you'd often hear me say, test, measure what matters. And in order to measure something, you have to have a system to help you measure that thing. So I'm going to walk you through the bridge framework that takes you from your own perspective into your stakeholders, your users' perspective, and kind of bridge the gap between our thinking and our teams or users' thinking, and how we can do that. And so the first thing is being curious. And this is where curiosity is a very important concept in my life. And without stepping back and asking the right questions and guiding ourselves through curiosity, it's really hard to understand other people. So what keeps you up at night, for example, on any project, is a key question, because that is going to tell you what those people on your team are worried about and is blocking them from thinking alongside of you, right? So to create influence, we have to, find a level of understanding. And this being curious is the first level of understanding. So for example, oftentimes when I ask this question and I go around the table with my team, a lot of things surface up that I might have not been aware of, but also like really great concept. So you would find the DevOps engineer being concerned about the server, throughput, or keeping the servers running, or the database person is concerned about having to refactor the database and having to migrate data. And because you're coming from that space and you start to understand their fears, we're starting to like, oh, so what do we need to do in order to take that out of the way, in order to open the way for new dialogue and to focus on the new features? Same thing with the product manager or the designer. They'll be coming from their own perspective. So the product manager would be like, we need to ship these features out. We've already promised the customers. We have numbers to match up to. Where the designer is going to be thinking about, well, I know you want to push this out very quickly, but the user experience is very clunky, and we need to make those workflows a little sharper before we push them out. And our user reviews, etc., all of those, we have to understand where they're coming from. I saw a question come through the chat. I love that. So the question is, at what point do you ask this question? You know, sometimes if you follow a process or you have a weekly meeting, it is good to ask that question at every meeting. So like it's not, so oftentimes it's like what was accomplished, what's next on your mind are the two common questions that we ask. But pivoting into what's keeping you up at night, or what is the obstacle in your way, right? Was it blocking you from getting to the next point, is another question that we should bring into all of the meetings. Sometimes I would be in a conversation and I feel like it's clunky, or something is not gelling, or the other person is being a bit more defensive, right? And I'm like trying to get my point across. I lean back a little bit and, step back and then ask a questions like, oh, seems like we're having a difficult conversation here. Could you tell me a little bit about why you think this might not work? Or why is this being difficult? Actually, now that I say that out loud, take the why out of all of your questions. Why questions are terrible questions, because as humans, we really hate the why question. It gets us on a defensive side. So it's really cool to step back and like, instead of why are you thinking about something this way, or why is this blocking us from moving forward, a question would be like, how can we take this and change it? Or what makes this difficult right now? How can we improve the situation? So any why question, I challenge you. Like, I put this challenge to everybody. There's like, take a why question, and if you can turn it into a what or how, please send it to me, because I would love to see what that question is. There's not a why question that cannot be turned into a how or what question. So to go back to your question, at what point do you ask that question? Any point when you're feeling the tension starting to build up in the beginnings of the meeting, so that you can get that out on the table and start discussing that, because that is going to bring a lot of really good conversations. So feel the tension, bring it into the rooms, practice it with your friends and significant others, because you will see a lot of things and pain points that don't surface in regular conversations, that you will have great conversations around when you ask this type of question. And obviously, it doesn't have to be exactly this way. You can do a lot of different permutations on it. So use what and how questions. They invite collaboration rather than defensive-ness. If you're not familiar with Chris Voss is a negotiation expert, and he wrote the book Never Split the Difference. And so it's a really good place to start by changing the way we ask questions. Questions demand answers, and therefore they have a significant power in the conversations. And whoever is asking the questions is yielding that power. So making your questions more collaborative invites more collaboration. I wonder, what are some of your favorite questions, and how can we work with those? What is a question you often find yourself asking in your team meetings or conversations?
Also, maybe not something that I ask, but it's something that is always after anything that, let's say if I comment about something, the PM will say, tell me more about it. I feel like that's always how she follow-ups with whatever anyone says, is like, tell me more about it. Yes. Just to keep digging a little more. Yes.
Yeah, I love that question. I use that question a lot as well. Like, tell me more about this. Sometimes I would also reflect back. So reflection, I was like, oh, you just said this is one of your favorite questions. Tell me more about that. Do you have a story? So the tell me more about it can like transform and evolve into many different permutations that you can utilize in different ways. Other favorite questions from our squad? If you have the MVP, we ask how this recommendation or feature aligns with the MVP from Janice. Yes, actually, that is a really powerful question at so many levels. Like when a product or proposal comes along, how does this align with the company goals? How does this align with our Q1 OKRs? What, like that alignment, and asking that question about alignment is very critical. It helps you understand more of the vision and direction and what the company or the team is trying to accomplish. It also puts you at a strategic level, right? You're no longer saying, yes, how can I do this? Or providing solutions. No, you're providing strategic thinking at that point, right? So you're shifting your thinking into being more higher level and more strategic. Annabelle says, also not a question per se, but I like to repeat back what they said. Yes. In a different way to ensure that I understood and that the group is all on the same page, since we all think about things in slightly different ways. Spot on. And that is the observe and reflect. So that reflecting back what we said helps us anchor the information for ourselves and invites more conversation, because there are so many times when I was like, oh, it sounds like you said this, or help me make sure I understand. It sounds like we're doing XYZ. And then, someone on my engineering team or any of the other teams like, oh, no, that's not what we're saying. We want to do XYZ. You said XY. So we're not doing that. So that is really a great, point to start and ask those questions. And reflection is excellent. Also, part of Chris Voss's book starts with that part, like reflect and name. So naming things is also really important because it helps other people understand. It's like, oh, it sounds like you're frustrated with this. So that's another way of reflecting and observing, is by naming what is happening in front of us. Lessons for life, really. All right. Recognizing different languages. It seems like we're all on the same page. We really know like the difficulty of and the challenge of having to come from different backgrounds and different experiences, different cultures, so many different ways that makes us unique in our experience and humanity. And coming together is how we create powerful and quality applications. Because can you imagine creating a recipe app by two guys, right, who don't cook? And like, what experience are they bringing to like a mom of like 5 or 6, or a single dad who needs to cook for his kids and pay attention to them in like 15 minutes, right? All of these walks of life need to be presented at the table. And if they're not, we need to be speakers for them as well. So we need to recognize the different languages and recognize the different paths and try to represent our users, whether we're product engineering or designers, it doesn't matter. Being an advocate for the user is really important. We sometimes use the same words and they mean different things to different people. And with that, David Gray is behind Liminal Thinking. One of my favorite books is this very tiny book. Beliefs aren't reality, they're models of reality. And our job becomes to, not to prove who we are in that space. And this is where a lot of the tension happens, is that we come from these models of reality in our minds, and we think that the other person is possibly challenging us, when the other person is not necessarily challenging us. They're being challenged by a problem that they're not articulating to us, right? And so our understanding of what each person, and how they see things, and allowing them to, by driving through questions and curiosity, allowing them to bring and articulate the problems there that are keeping them up at night or frustrating them, brings that collaboration a little closer. And by the way, if you are thinking about like how all of this connects to influence, when you are that person in the room who understands people, guess what? People are going to come to you to brainstorm ideas. And that is when you can start shift things and providing and connecting the right people and the right dots and the right steps. And that's where influence happens. Influence doesn't happen by titles, and influence doesn't happen. I mean, obviously, a title has its weight in an organization, but the people who pay attention, who create the connections and plug into everyone in the room and understands where they're coming from, has the biggest influence. Obviously, don't forget your competencies and making sure you do the work as well. So talking is not the only thing, right? I'm assuming everyone has that competency, and then you layer it in with these conversations and these questions and these frameworks that will launch you into that influence space, regardless of where you are in the organization and what title you have in the organization. Before we move into the invest in understanding before we solve, how are we feeling about what we've covered so far? And do you have other questions? All right. So I think it's the color is there. This is what this conversation is about, is invest in understanding before we solve. How many like thumbs up or thumbs down? How many of you come from an engineering background, or the first thought when someone is explaining a problem to you is like, I have a solution for it. Like, I'm going to raise both my hands, right? It's like, this is how I think. So thumbs up if you're the type of person who immediately thinks that, oh, I need to solve this problem. Or there's someone who sits back and is like, oh, it's not my problem. I'll let them solve it themselves. So thumbs up if you are a problem solver. One thumbs up. Wow. All right. Now I see it. Okay. So problem solving, it's an urge, right? Like when someone is explaining a problem, our brains fire on all cylinders. We want to solve that problem because that's why we're here. This is why we learn. We want to solve the world's problems. But stepping back and figuring out really what the underlying issue is and investing in understanding that before jumping to solutions saves so much time. I'll give you an easy one. Most of the time when I was switching from an IC to leadership, I thought I was still in that mentality of I have to prove myself by solving all the problems, by building all the architectures. When someone in my engineering team comes to me with a problem, I'm trying to give them like multiple solutions. You can do this, you can do that, you can do this. And they're like, no, that doesn't work. No, that doesn't work. No, that doesn't work. So we are like hitting, at each other. I'm like trying to solve. He's like, no, you can't do it this way. Try to solve it another way. They're like, no, you can't solve it this way. Instead of, tell me more about it. Because even the people who come to you with problems are very likely to have a solution in mind. The problem we all probably have is that we have not articulated that solution to ourselves because we haven't articulated the problem. When you articulate the problem, the solution shows up. So if you allow your partner in the conversation to ask them questions, they'll be like, oh yeah, okay. It's like, tell me more about it. You will find at some point, they'll be like, oh, wait just a second. I just solved this. I know what I'm going to do. Even personal problems, like even on the most like trivial things or the most devastating personal problem, and someone's coming to you with like all of this emotional charge and it's like, tell me more about it. Yes, that is frustrating. So like we're reflecting, we're naming, we're asking questions. By the end of the conversation, everyone walks away with an actual solution. And what you did in that space is create the safety for that person and the support for your team to be able to dive into those problems. So Janice is asking, so we listen to learn instead of listening to respond? Yes. We're listening to learn because immediately when you learn, you are able to respond. And sometimes our response is nothing. The number of times where I see a chat message with a question coming my way, and I'm like, let me just finish what I'm doing here for a few minutes, and then I'll switch tasks to this other message that's coming my way. Just because that person was able to articulate it into the question, when I go and say, is like, oh, is this still a problem? They're like, no, I solved it. Like, I think 95% of those type of questions, if I leave it for 3 to 5 minutes, the person who asked the question has already found a solution for what they're asking for. I'm like, great, tell me about it next meeting. So yes, if we listen to learn and understand, if we listen with curiosity, we'll find all the responses we need to respond, and it's likely naming, reflecting, and asking another question. Keep asking questions in the chat. I see all of them. So this is another one of understanding and investing in, instead of trying to solve first, brings us to this. People don't buy what you do. They buy why you do it. And we were just talking, Juliet, like in the beginning, you said their final presentation is coming up soon, right? This is something I also repeat to my students, because they're going through sprints and they're building their MVP, as like, no one is going to talk about the details of how you build this code. Don't tell me about the engineering behind it. Tell me why you chose this problem. Why are you investing in solving this problem and how you solved it? Like, show me the demo and give me a story. Give me the story of like, I was frustrated with all of the Instagram apps and all the time they take. I wanted to create something light and clean I could go to and get a wise, encouraging word and go on with my day. It's one of the projects my students are building. So like, we don't want to know the what and how you did something. We want to know why, because the why is where your passion and compassion and humanity shows up, right? I know we talk about don't ask the why questions. Don't ask them to other people. Ask yourself the 5 whys until you get to the depth of why you're doing something, why you're approaching a problem. Why do you want to buy that pair of jeans instead of that pair of jeans? Why is a good question to ask ourselves with compassion, and it's what connects us with other people. So start with why, and then you'll figure out the how and what. And then this is key. And we have so many tools with AI these days where, documenting is becoming a lot easier, but knowing where a decision comes from is really important. Imagine yourself today making a decision to, pivot a product direction in one way, and you don't document that decision, and you come back to it 5 months, 3 months from now, and you're asked like, why did we do that? How many, raise your hand or like give us a thumbs up of how many times personal or work related, as like you've gone through that. It's like, wait, why did I change this method this way? Why did we add this button here? Why did we change this feature? So give me a thumbs up if you've gone through that. Annabelle, yes. If you've never done that before or have not experienced that moment in the past, I would love to talk with you because I want to learn. And then we go into, when we make decisions and we create, I recently stopped saying psychological safety. I no longer buy into psychological safety, but I want to create the concept of it. Because especially in corporate worlds, like you can create psychological safety in your personal life. But I want to create in the work environment a psychological support. Safety in the work environment is, like knowing that you're going to be working in that company or that team is supporting you or that manager is going to be there for you all the time. And whatever decisions that you make are going to be supported by your manager and your leadership. Thinking about that as safety gives us a level of like comfort that the work environment these days and the changes we see in corporate culture is different. So think about it from a different space. How are we supported? Are we creating a supportive culture for our teams? And how are we supporting our teams in what they navigate? I'm going to switch into the comments. Annabelle is saying, I constantly link Slack threads and Jira tickets and any communication documentation together like breadcrumbs for my future self. Yes, that's why these amazing tools exist. Like these connections and these conversations in the context of what we do is really important, so we don't miss any of those points. So that's a great shortcut. That's a great tip. Thank you for sharing that, Annabelle. I want to make sure that I don't, take away the concept of psychological safety, because it is really important, and it's important in our personal life. What I'm talking about with the psychological support or the supportive culture is when we talk about corporate culture and how we show up at work. We're not looking for safety, we're looking for support. And that support is what creates the ability to innovate and take risk and manage those risks. Because if we're supported and we know how we're supported, it changes the conversation. If you're looking for safety at work, it's not the right place. This is my personal opinion. And then go slow to go fast. Another way of saying it is slow is smooth and smooth is fast. Because when you go slow, and everything in this talk is about that, when we slow down and ask the questions, because when we have that sense of urgency that's driving us to get things done, we lose track of what's important and we run into problems. And because going slow to go fast is the concept, and it took me a lot of time, by the way, to get into this place of slow is smooth, smooth is fast. And now in any conversation, any service provider that I work with on a personal level, I'm like, this is my motto. If that doesn't work for you, and if you're going to send me an email asking me to do something, by the end of the day, that's not going to happen, and that's not the relationship I'm going to build. Slow is smooth and smooth is fast. You get to make your decisions, you build on those decisions, and things will move a lot faster when you have a strong foundation. And the next thing is the best teams have task conflicts, debating ideas without relationship conflict or personal attacks. So when you go slow, especially in the beginning, you accelerate things because you're not building on a shaky relationship. You're strengthening your relationships and building on a concrete foundation with your team. And that way, everyone has a shared mental model of what's going on, your values, the direction, your user personas. And when you build that foundation and that component, then it becomes a task conflict. Tasks are small in the arc of a program increment or an entire project or an entire MVP. A task, we can get on a call for 5 minutes and negotiate what we're going to do. But negotiating a relationship, 3 months into the project, is much harder to go into. So build those relationships. If you're new to a company or you're about to get into a job, take the first 90 days, especially the first month, to curate your relationships, to invest in relationships and build on those relationships. Then, so the last one is expect and embrace tension, right? Expect the unexpected. The things that are going to go wrong are going to go wrong. Failure is going to happen at some level. So be okay with it. Be okay with the unknown. Be okay with the tension and be curious about it. And that's when you take the curiosity and dissolve all the tension with it. So instead of, would you take a look to say curious instead of staying armored up? Because that's where we build the defenses. And the why question is what turns that defensive up immediately, right? And I'm going to say, you can get courage without rambling with vulnerability. So yeah, it's hard. It's really hard to be curious. It's hard to be curious about ourselves, so to be curious about others without putting our armor down, without being vulnerable, is very challenging. And when I talk about vulnerability, I'm not talking about you have to tell people your life story, but being open. I was like, this is frustrating to me, or it's like, like using this terminology and this framework to build understanding and to build shared mental models is really important. And you bring your vulnerability by asking the questions and by saying that you don't understand and framing it from what position you're in. So framing is also another important piece. And so these are all the bridge elements. Be curious, recognize differences, invest in your relationship, invest in understanding before you start solving, document key decisions, go slow to go fast, and expect and embrace tension and the unknown. And with that, I'm going to pause here. The previous slide is some of the books that I reference oftentimes, and they're for you. I don't like to push or share with people. It's like, you must read this book. It's like, these are the books that influenced my career and my life, and I share them because they are really impactful books. And we are here. So this is really good. So I can stay on for a few more minutes. I'd love to hear more of your questions. And also, if you have questions that are around AI, do that. I talk about AI all the time, about staying grounded with all of the hype and all of that and all of the career transitions. So if you have questions on anything, I am here to answer.
I would actually like if you would go in a little bit about AI. I think, there is a lot of focus on it right now. There's a lot of companies using it and prioritizing it, but also very clearly it's becoming a bubble. I do think it is not going to be the be all end all. Some people think it is. So yeah, I'm just kind of curious what your approach to us learning those tools, how much time to invest in it, how much time or how much should we highlight it in our resumes, things like that.
Yeah, AI is not going away. It's a new technology. It's the next evolution of all of our technical work and software engineering, and AI is not new. What became new a few years ago when OpenAI created ChatGPT is that it made it accessible and conversational. And that's the big thing, right? Otherwise, AI has been here. As humans, we've been thinking about it. You can go back to automatas and golems and all of these concepts from like early cultures, right? And folk stories. So as humans, we think about this all the time. So no wonder we're getting into an age, and it's very exciting to be in an AI space. So I say the hype is very real. A lot of reports, and so I go back to something I said earlier in the conversation. Be grounded in the data. Do not follow the hypes. Do not follow concepts and promises that these AI companies are promising all of us, like, oh, you're going to save so much. You're going to, have an army of AI bots or something like that. The technology is not quite there. And the reports show that. Like the MIT report from this summer showed that 95% of companies that approached AI and automation had failed. The 5% are probably the companies that are creating these AI agents and models so on a personal level, learn AI. Don't put all of your AI into one tool. Explore the different tools, and to stay grounded in it. Also explore it from the value point that they're providing to you. So like, what is OpenAI's philosophy? What is Claude's philosophy? What is Gemini's philosophy? How are they handling your data? Because your data right now is your currency. Your workflows, how you think and collaborate with the AI is all going into their models to train the next generation of models, right? So treat your data and your collaboration with AI as currency, because data is currency these days, right? All of this hype around data centers and all, because data is the key to building those AIs. I use AI on a daily level, like on a daily basis. I created my own sort of AI agents that are like a product manager or a designer, but they're here to help me from different perspectives. So like what we're saying in this conversation is that what AI can bring to you is that first level of interrogating your thoughts and brainstorming. It has a lot of good stuff, but also because it's trained on like lots of what's out in the internet, it's also becoming sort of mediocre. So like, for example, I'll share a personal and vulnerable story that I had. And Juliet, please pause me or say cut when you're ready for us to cut. So I use Google Workspace because I want to have custody over my data. And so I use Notebook LM for a lot of things. I love it. I loved it since I was working at Google. It was like dog fooding it. It's an incredible tool because I can give it a set of sources and references and say, and then I can ask it where these things are, what I can do with it. I've used it with, anonymized user research. I was like, oh, who said this? Because, after you go through like 30 user interviews, I was like, someone said this somewhere. Where can I find it? So AI is really good for those tasks instead of you spending 3-4 hours sifting through those interviews or these papers or something like that. They had new features, and some of the new features is creating videos and creating slides, and they give you options, and they give you like a text box where I could like say more like of what I want on the slides. And I ran it and I saw the video. I'm like, oh my gosh, what am I for? Like 30 plus years in the industry and the experience, and this little AI tool is like making me question my relevance. But it was great. Like the video at face value is great. And then I'm like, okay, fine. I can post this on LinkedIn as my lecture, right? And so now I started paying attention to it step by step and to the words that it was saying and what it created. I'm like, no, I want to create something different. So, like all of these tools will give you something, will give you a start. If you are a person who pays attention to detail and you're the SME, the expert on your field, these tools don't really give you what you need, right? And so as an expert in your field, your responsibility and how you present yourself is not going to be fulfilled with AI. It's going to give you the 80%, right? Are anyone familiar with the 80-20 rule? Like 80% of the work is done in 20% of the time. 20% of the work is done in 80% of the time, because that polish and rigor around what we're delivering in the world and that quality we're looking for, AI is not doing that 20%. It's doing the 80%. It's great at researching. I use Perplexity and Gemini for like deep searches because they have credible sources. I use Claude for reasoning and for writing. It really has a really good collaborative and reasoning models. I use ChatGPT for like random things on the go, random stuff. I use them in my area of expertise. I don't use them in other people's area of expertise. I'm not going to ask an AI about a medical problem. I'm not going to ask an AI about launching, something. That is the limit of where AI is. So use it because it augments what you do. Don't use it to replace you. Use it to take over the tasks that you don't like doing, right? Like in product management, like keeping track of backlogs or what's been completed, all of that stuff is a great place for AI to like manage all of that stuff, because I know a lot of my product people spend so much time on spreadsheets or Trello or Jira or all of that stuff versus creating the high value information of like why and focusing on the relationship, because as product managers, as designers, and the relationships and that high level strategy, like pushing ourselves up, is the most critical piece right now. So be the expert on that. Let the AI take over the things that you don't like doing. Let the AI summarize what the team did last week and what wasn't done. It's good at that. Always test it and make sure it's actually returning the right results. I hope that's a long answer for your question.
Yeah, no, that's really helpful.
Yes.
I think
Yeah.
I've been, trying to ask, anyone I can about their feelings about AI because, yeah, I agree it's not going anywhere, but I think it needs to be thought about critically. So I just thank you for your thoughts on it.
Yeah. Do not give up your critical thinking to AI. Never give up your critical thinking to AI. That's what makes us strategic and critical in the work that we do. That's what gives us value also. Other AI questions? So,
sorry, I was thinking a little bit because the students that you have right now are kind of doing the same as the squads are doing at the moment. Is like, how do you match that with AI as like, maybe this is my first project working in a cross-functional team? What kind of, how they are using it and engaging in their processes? Yeah.
I love that question. So if I was I'm gonna say, if I was an engineer and I'm like new on the project, or I'm trying to present our technical vision, what I would do, knowing what I know and my experience with AI right now, I would take my proposal, make sure that if that proposal is company property, that you're using AI tools that are allowed by the company and allowed for, like, especially if it's I work in a lot of need to know type of work. So if it's that kind of work, don't put it in AI unless it's like your company's AI, right? But here's how I would use it. So let's say for my students, what I encourage them to do is take your proposal and know who's going to be in that meeting. So like, is it the senior designers? Is it the product manager? And say, act as a product manager with experience in fintech products. I am going to propose the attached technical overview for the team discussion. I want to know the top 5 questions the product manager will ask me on this, right? And AI will read that document, will bring its sources about like what a product manager in fintech is going to do, and is going to ask me questions like, oh, the product manager would want to know how long would X take? And what is the most critical thing, where you should start? So like what a product manager would ask. So I would encourage people to say, let the AI ask you a different perspective. Like, you're the expert. If you're the designer, have them act as the product manager, or have them act as the other, an engineer, right? Because between the product and engineering, there's a designer, right? So the designer has to communicate the user needs, the UI, the UX, all those pieces. So use AI to do that with you. As a product manager, I would also say, I would level myself up and say, if I'm a new product manager or a mid-level product manager, I say act as a senior or a director level product manager on a strategic, level. What would you ask me more in this report? Like if I'm writing a PRD, like a product, report, I would ask the AI to test it from a senior leadership position or from a different position. So ask it to act as something else other than you.
Thank you. Love it.
Yeah. Other questions?
I will say that some of our squads, their squad meeting is just right after this meeting. So I feel like some of them drop off already. But I love this. Thank you so much. I feel like this conversation and a talk that it could be pretty much for all the 15 weeks that the squads are working together. This is always, that can always be added on in what we do. So I love it. Thank you so much.
Yeah. Thank you so much for having me, all of you. Thank you for the questions and the interactions. Feel free to connect with me on LinkedIn and ask more questions. I'm happy to answer all of your questions. I love the curiosity about it. So stay curious and hope to see you all again.
Thank you so much.
Thank you so much. I will message you and I will tag you when we put these in